Welcome back to the X Podcast. You are listening right now into the X Podcast. My name is Russ Moore, sitting here across from Tim Moore on the Putin table. You're back.
I'm back. I just like when you said the X Podcast, all I could think of was the Ohio State University. Do people say the? Yeah, it's pretty funny.
When I first got here, I
laughed
hosting 5 years ago from the platform in Lancaster and said, everybody excited? I was trying to like connect. I was like, everybody excited about the Ohio Buckeyes? And I had 10 people come to me afterwards just like, oh my gosh, you realize what you just said? And I'm like, no, what? And they said, you said Ohio instead of Ohio State. And I was like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It does sound...
Because there's another school.
Right.
The Ohio Bobcats. There's Ohio University.
Wait, is that real?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's their mascot. The Ohio Bobcats is OU, Ohio University.
Well, I have an announcement
versus
to
Ohio
make
State
that
University.
Might shock you.
What's that?
On Saturday...
You wore a Ohio State shirt?
I bought my first Ohio State
t-shirt.
Finally.
See, you have learned to get away from the Clemson disaster that is happening right now. You can have that. You can have two teams.
Listen, Dad, if you're listening, it was more of I was honoring the person I was with, and it was like a win in Rome moment because we're going to watch I guess tailgate
awesome.
At East Market.
You need to. While you're here, you need to just embrace it.
So,
you can placate your dad.
when I go back to Greenville.
When you go back to Greenville.
Yes.
But your dad can't be that excited anyways.
I don't think he's doing well emotionally right now with Clemson. So
Clemson had their moment in the sun.
They're not doing well.
Yeah.
Not doing too well. But I'm back, and you...
Ohio State is.
You were gone 6 weeks, and the moment I had to leave for Egypt, you returned.
Yeah. We were two ships passing in the night. And... it's a weird...
It is. It's a weird analogy. But
like
we're back. How was your break?
It was good. Very good.
I know you caught up a little bit on it. You know, a couple podcasts ago.
Yeah, I did. I caught up with a couple of guys. But
you had a great restful 6 weeks of nonstop travel.
Yes, that's what it felt like.
You feel like your soul's been reset?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Huh.
I do. I feel like it was good.
You got some revelations from Mount Sinai, from the mountain?
I was on the mountain, but it wasn't Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
But it was good. Had a really good time. I think it made me more aware of how much I needed it. And so I think I came back feeling refreshed and more excited about moving forward. And so it's one of those ones that physically I think I was feeling fine. Probably I didn't realize that mentally I was probably as exhausted as I was.
Yeah.
You know, just having that. And so I came back feeling rested from that.
That's great.
So, good to go. And I came back. And you left. Literally the same day.
Yes. I mean, literally, we were passing by. I was trying to see you before the 9:30 because I had to go straight to the airport. And you were hiding. I was looking all through the foyer.
Yeah.
And they said you were in the storage closet. I don't know what it was.
Not.
A couple things as we catch up. Number one, while you were over there, you and Matt admiring the screen, I was told to give you the challenge that you have to finish that water before the end of this podcast, which you just downed some of it. I have a question, and I don't want you to take this. I want you to take this in a very honoring way.
Okay.
That's not a great preamble, is it?
I'm working on it.
Is drinking water a generational thing? Because when I was...
Well, my daughter drinks a lot of water. Well, one of them does.
The reason I ask, my dad, you and my dad are not the same age, but...
not even close.
But, like, my dad really struggles with, like, just drinking water throughout the day. Yeah. Like, and Pastor Steve, same way. Well,
it was definitely not a thing when I was younger and growing up.
Yeah.
Like, it was in the last decade to maybe 15 years that it really became popularized that you should drink a lot of water.
Yeah. Because, like, my dad, like, if it's, like, hot outside or he's been, like, mowing the lawn or something, like, going in and getting a super ice cold thing of water to quench his thirst real quick, he's all about that.
Yeah.
But, like, just to regularly drink water throughout the day when he's not thirsty, he's like, son, I just can't. Yeah. Like, I've tried to pressure him into it. He's like, I just can't.
I think it's just some people develop that habit a little bit younger, and maybe it was just something, that I just feel like it, believe it or not, I'm just going to say, I think it became popularized when social media hit.
Really? Because I've always heard that you need to drink a lot of water my whole life.
Yeah, the only people I ever heard that from was people that were into working out and competitions, because I only knew of people that were either doing sports where they had to hydrate, and even then, when I was like growing up and doing sports, it was not water.
Yeah,
I mean that was even back in the day when Gatorade and all those, you need electrolytes, you needed this, so it wasn't even just water. And then I feel like after that it was I only heard about like fighters, mixed martial art, like people trying to lose weight. You drink a lot of water before you're trying to cut your weight so that your body is used to a certain amount. And then you're a couple days before weigh-in, you don't drink any water. And so your body gets used to passing all of that water, but then you stop giving it water, and it just keeps passing and passing until there's none. And because you're trying to deplete all the liquid you can out of your system just to make weigh-in. So I heard about that stuff like 10, 12, 15 years ago. Or bodybuilding. I mean, you always, as long as I've gone to the gym, there's guys carrying around a jug of water, because there's. But that's all I ever heard. I didn't hear it you didn't have mom influencers on TikTok talking about their Stanleys and their other, and I got this one and this one. So that stuff is just, that's all new.
Yeah.
Like it's now become culturally cool. I don't even think it's about health. It's like culturally cool to have like these special different drinks.
Hot take. I'm not a big Stanley fan. Oh, speaking of hot takes.
Yeah, I heard all about the hot takes.
Yes, those, I mean, okay, like, do you have any hot takes on our hot takes?
I don't have hot takes on your hot takes, but I'm starting to save my own hot takes.
Okay, have you watched?
I actually started a document.
Did you?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of one. I didn't get a chance to watch it.
I prophesied that this will be a hit.
Oh.
It's okay. So we need to do another one with you on it.
Well, how much did you get into the heresy?
Well,
exactly.
We called those our heavier hot takes. We didn't go super deep into the heresy. There's a couple that I almost shared that I was warned I should not share.
Yeah.
But we need to do another. Are you open to it?
Sure.
Another hot takes one with this time you, me, Zach, and Jesse.
4 of us.
The 4 of us.
Sure. Why not?
You sound very not.
No,
excited.
let's do it.
Okay. All right.
No.
So
we just don't often have 4 people here, but why not?
Let's do it. There's been a whole lot transpire in the 6.5 months since I've seen you.
We're not going back over everything that's transpired.
We're not, but we at least got to hit a couple things. In one of the episodes, the controversial ones, we talked about aliens.
Yeah.
So we need to talk about that with you soon.
You don't want to talk about
aliens because you have a lot of thoughts on aliens.
I do.
But
I actually do have thoughts on aliens, but people probably would not like my take.
Oh, I want to hear it now. No, definitely. Actually, I think I know. But
no.
But okay. But speaking of that, while I was out of the country, we'll get to that in a minute. I started getting on my phone these updates that in Mexico. Did you see this? Mm-hmm. Aliens were being presented to the Mexican government in their Congress. What are your thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts yet about that. It just seemed like
I actually watched.
Seemed like a farce.
I actually watched Neil deGrasse Tyson's reaction on it.
What did he say?
It was very interesting. He just said, he's like, I think it's great if they're going to make it available to the public. He said what they really need to do, if it's valid. He actually seemed more open-minded than I thought. He said is they need to make it, what you do with this kind of evidence is you make it available to the wide body of scientists for everybody to look at. Yeah. He said, I have a couple things that seem odd. He said the fact that, I guess something about the fact that there's like a nasal like bone still in place. He said that seems odd. He said it seemed odd that the species would look very human.
Yeah.
But anyways, by the way, with your love of science and everything, physics and all that kind of stuff, did you hear about Neil deGrasse Tyson's new book, To Infinity and Beyond? It's all about black holes, about,
I have
looks
heard about
fascinating.
I have heard about it.
Writer strike might almost be over. That'd be great news.
I heard they are going to, I think it just has to go to the final vote, but it looks like it's a very good option for the writers. Does anybody care?
Oh, I feel like I do. And here's the reason I care is because
what show did I
miss late at night, kind of like my little indulgence was I would turn on. It was almost like a way of getting news, but almost lighthearted at night. I would turn on the different late night shows. I would watch.
So have they been not airing?
No,
I don't know. I don't watch late night
Kimmel,
shows. So I don't care.
Fallon, which I don't really like Fallon. I don't. No, I like Jimmy Fallon. I don't like Kimmel, but like Fallon. Steven, what's his face? Oh my gosh,
I know the one your favorite.
Yeah, he's actually my favorite. Colbert, yeah. Colbert, of course.
So they literally have the shows been off.
All of the shows been off. They haven't had The Daily Show or Stephen Colbert or Fallon or Kimmel or there's one other one.
Sadly, it hasn't affected me at all.
Yeah.
I didn't even know
They haven't
because I
had
don't
that in
watch
6-7
those.
months.
I don't watch those, so it didn't affect me at all. So are they back now, or they might be?
They might be.
soon.
Yes. Okay, I got one last question, and then we don't really have like a crazily defined topic, but we're just it's like a catch up episode. You're back, I'm back. It's a reunion moment. But how often do you think of Rome?
Why does this keep coming up? Why does this keep coming up?
Okay.
What is? I heard this already once.
So I didn't know this was a TikTok thing, but can I just tell you, two of my favorite people in the world, and they're the most voracious readers, and they're beautiful people, and they're like they're two of the deepest, most like, I don't even know how to explain them, but they're some of my friends from Lexington when I lived there back in the day. This was the post. She said, I asked Michael how often he thinks of Rome and recorded his response. I won't read all of it, but basically he said, she said, why do you think about it? And he said, because he said, I think about it all the time. And she said, well, what do you think? And he said, the glory of Rome, the glory that was Constantinople. And he sighed. So the glory of their great roads, the gardens, his was his response. Yeah, the roads were great and they're still there. And now a lot of people are probably thinking about Rome pre-Christendom, but not me. I think of post-Constantine. I mean, yeah, obviously I'll think of Caesar, Augustus, everybody, but I think a lot more about Constantinople, Eastern Rome, before they moved to the capital. The Varangian Guard, the Turks breaking upon the gates of Constantinople like waves crashing against the shore.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, I think about the Gallic campaigns, the fall of the Republic. Now, do I think of Rome much pre-Caesar? Not so much. And then he went on and he said, I think it excites all men to some extent, desire conquest. And he says, whether it's the boardroom at a large business, whether it's capturing the heart of a fair maiden, whether it's wresting control from nature and turning her gifts and her bounties to your benefit, within every man is a seed to explore, to overcome, to struggle, and to ultimately conquer. And if that is not nourished to some degree in a man's life, he withers. What are your thoughts?
I have none. I do not want to comment.
No?
No.
Why?
Do you want to comment? I'll let you comment.
I think it's kind of beautiful, although I don't think I think about Rome a lot. I mean, I've been to Rome. I love Rome.
Yeah.
But I don't think about the Roman Empire that often.
Yeah.
Is that weird?
No.
According to him, he says he thinks about it every day, once a day.
I think that's really odd. To think about Roman Empire that much. To think about a failed empire that much.
Well, he says it's the most glorious Western civilization, like empire in Western civilization.
Yeah.
And he says, why would you not think of that and admire it?
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah.
It was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, 1,600, 1,700 years ago. When do they, I mean, technically, I mean,
yeah.
Post-cancer, I don't know. I think they asked me that on the other one. Do you think about Rome? I was like, no, I don't think. Well, actually, I do think about Rome. I thought about Rome more often than most people because of what I have to do for a living.
Yes.
Not what I have to, what I get to do for a living.
Yes.
That sounded bad.
Yeah.
I think about it just because Jesus' time, when the Gospels were written, all the New Testament era all took place under Roman control.
Yeah.
So I think about it.
Yeah.
But that's why I don't think about it for any other. I don't romanticize this. I don't find a connection with the male ego.
Okay, he would argue about the ego.
Okay, I'm sorry.
This man is actually one of the humblest, kindest, deepest wells.
It
I've
was
ever met.
very beautifully written.
Yes,
I will say that it's very beautifully written. But I don't.
And only read a quarter of it.
But I don't. Well, I don't. Yeah, I understand. I think there is probably. I don't know if I necessarily draw the correlation between someone's internal drive to be successful and the connection for conquest. They may be. I guess I don't ever put those together in my head.
So what's been burning?
Naturally.
What's been burning inside of you since
Roman Empire?
Okay,
That's
besides
for sure.
Roman Empire, since sabbatical, what have you been thinking about?
Since the sabbatical?
Yeah, what's been burning inside of you?
Oh, I can't even go into what's burning inside of me.
No?
Why? Well, what's burning inside of me? Did you hear that we collected part of an asteroid?
We talked about that. Yes.
So yeah, that's not been burning inside of me.
Okay.
I just thought that was fascinating.
That's what's been burning through the atmosphere. What's been burning through Tim?
Well done. It was at 5,000 degrees. That's how much the front of the spaceship, the shuttle that was coming back. So
That's crazy.
I was just reading all about it. It's pretty fascinating to get that. So, but anyways, what in what particular burning since sabbatical? I think I just had a more of a renewed vigor for what is ahead to accomplish. And And I think that's partly what I never realized until the sabbatical that I
Like
was
you haven't
missing.
had permission to dream.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was just coming off of, like I said, not only was there the pandemic, but then there was also a massive building project that we did here. And so those things combined, I think, just probably take a lot out of you and just, getting settled in. And so I feel like I'm more in a great state of mind to actually look ahead.
Yes.
I think I was maybe, I just say this because I didn't really feel like this all the time, but I was probably more emotionally and mentally treading water than I realized. I guess I probably didn't realize that. Because when you live under again, as I say, you live under the constant pressure of just every single, you almost aren't aware of how you really feel.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of sometimes get a little bit out from under that. And that's to kind of like find out. But I did well. I did 4 counseling appointments, and they were really good, and they enabled me to really kind of contemplate some things.
Yeah, that's good.
I don't know that I'm at liberty to talk about them at this point, but
You just tell me off air.
yeah, I'll tell you off air.
Okay.
But anyways, just things
great.
things that I'm processing that like for me. So one of the things I won't necessarily get into it all because I think I don't ever really like to talk about. They're not like super deep personal. I don't like to talk about things that I'm processing about myself until I've had time to process about myself. Like I don't. And so one of the things that I think became apparent through this break, through counseling and other things was trying to understand what rest really looks like for me. I think, a lot of people define rest differently, and a lot of that I think is just how we're wired. And so, even just the simplistic part of what kind of like vacations refill you and which kind don't. And so I noticed immediately, like going and sitting on a beach does not refill me. And so like just even talking through, and we did that a bit, and just talking through that, even with just counselor you just have to recognize that the way your mind works and the way you are, that you might actually feel it doesn't refill you. There might you might need space for your mind to explore ideas, things, concepts. That might actually bring excitement and rest. It may not be plopping around and doing nothing.
Yeah, it's very.
So for me, that was like I just began to work through it, and I don't even have an answer, but ask that question.
That's fascinating. I think. Well, and you and I had a lot of conversations pre-sabbatical around vision, personal, church, all kind of things, and I've, so I'm excited to hear it. Even for me, I had somebody about a year ago. They're like, Russ, you've not given yourself permission to dream in a while.
Yeah,
and it's like, and I feel like I'm very vision oriented, vision fueled, but that's an interesting thought.
Do you now?
Yeah, the last.
I love the way you say it because I totally agree, and but what I'm getting is I don't know if that's a byproduct of the last few years.
Yes, because
I feel the same way. It's hard for me to really look ahead. I feel like I'm getting to the place of kind of getting excited about that, but it's been really hard.
Yes, and not to turn this public podcast into a therapy session, but the last 8 weeks have been intense in a lot of different ways. So right now, if I'm just being vulnerable, I wouldn't say like my dream bucket is overflowing.
Right.
But I'm getting there.
Yeah.
And but I just think it's so important, and it's really interesting. This is probably another topic for another podcast, but what you're processing with your counselor as far as about like how do you rest, how do you vacation? I think it's a fascinating concept because I go back and forth sometimes on. Like, let's just be honest. Like, one of the spiritual disciplines and practices, even spirituality aside for the soul, that's really important is solitude and silence.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask me on the surface, does it feel exciting to me? I'd say no, it's miserable.
Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions, I'm curious if you've processed this any, is what's the line between, okay, I have had such a cancerous restlessness for so long that something that might be good for me feels horrible and counterproductive at first.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean I shouldn't do it and that it wouldn't be restorative in the long run.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How do you process the tension between...
That's good.
I don't know.
I understand I more intuitively understand than I have an answer because I feel the same way. And so those were conversations that I think by my fourth session, and mostly through the sabbatical that I was really wrestling with of going. So here's a I think there are things that our soul naturally just intuitively moves toward that brings excitement and fills you.
Yes.
I don't know that is always the recipe for what your soul needs.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so, but I also don't know. Okay, so maybe you're running at a fast pace. Your life is a little bit busy, maybe a little hectic. Maybe you're burning it at both ends. Maybe all this stuff. What someone would maybe prescribe would be, you need to force yourself to go sit on a beach for 6 hours and slow down and do nothing. Okay, I could do that, but it would be torturous, and I don't know that it would actually refill me. I think, like, I don't know how to describe this, but we went to the beach for a week with our family trip. We did that. Then we had a trip that we had planned a long while ago before we even made that, to go with some friends and go on a cruise. And so we did that for 6 days. And then after that, we ended up staying with some friends in the mountains of Colorado. And I told my wife, it was like day one there, driving in. I don't know why, but and we're just driving around there. This place excites me. They're like, for her, it's different. I don't know what it is. We hadn't even done any hiking. We hadn't done any of that stuff. Even if we didn't do it, the view, the air, I don't know how to describe it. Just literally driving around there, go, like, I take it all in. I go sit in front of the beach, and I'm not going to do that. Yeah. It's a flat horizon. Right. I'm just not. It doesn't get me excited. She loves that.
That doesn't inspire you.
She still would, So it was helpful even having that stuff back to back for me and talking with a counselor, because it wasn't just about the vacation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, what is the thing that kind of renews and refills your mind and your spirit and I think it is. I'm coming to this conclusion. It's more individualistic than I realized. And she, just in conversations, it was just helpful for me. Like, you might need to be mentally challenged in order to feel refilled. And it's like, what? Like, but in a different way. Like, maybe in a different, like, you might need to have a different type of escape that isn't just do nothing, think nothing, be nothing. Yeah. Like, that may not do anything for you. Whereas it could be going on a hike, going on this adventure, going this dream, thinking about this, processing this deep philosophical, you know what I mean? Like, might be the kind of thing that really refills you. Sure. It's just weird to think, because we think less activity, the better. Yeah. Or no activity equals rest. Yeah. And that may not be the case for all of us. But that kind of gave me a little bit of permission. Yeah. And so I started asking the question, and I did not have the answer to it. Because I was really in a very contemplative, and we weren't even planning on talking about this, but in a very contemplative way. Part of what I was doing in the sabbatical was trying to get to a place of, like, what do I need to allow an equilibrium in my soul? What do I need to allow myself to rest? What do I need to do that? So I think part of this was in that process coming to a realization that I don't know. So it's almost like you took 6 weeks of rest to begin to figure out how do you rest. Yeah, and I don't have an answer. Which isn't bad. But I don't have an answer. Yeah. Like, I literally, that was one of my questions that I kind of was processing toward the end and walking away. Okay, what is it for me? Yeah. Because I want to figure out how to build that rhythm into it. Like, hey, if my wife is going to sit on a beach somewhere, well, let's make sure that we do that sometime. Yeah. But what is it for me that I really crave, maybe my soul craves, that I don't understand, and maybe subconsciously, or maybe I need it, that really is restorative for me? Yeah. And it could change. And so that could come out in a different regular rhythm, right? You might do a Sabbath that is weekly, and for somebody a Sabbath might be to really, like, unplug and not think and veg, or read a book and not this. Or it could be, working out, something that you love to do. It could be something that inspires you, your mind, something, you know what I mean? without it being work. I think
Yeah.
the big key is like trying to decide what is work and what needs to get left
Sure.
when you rest and what will actually restore you. And I didn't have a great answer. I literally told the counselor, I said, I'm really trying to figure out what it is that causes it. And she said, you're just going to have to recognize that you're probably wired differently than maybe other people that you know. And whatever their prescription is for rest may not work for you.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that was a fascinating process.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to have you back. And, you know, I think I told you, but for the second or third time in my life, I started seeing a counselor while you're gone.
Yeah.
And, so just,
Let's dive into your deep secrets.
Yeah. Well, we'll set aside a 5-week series for that. And what all's wrong with Russ.
Yeah.
And get some solutions for me. I'm just kidding. Speaking of non-vacations.
Yeah.
I just went on a non-vacation.
Yeah.
Because it was, if you've been following the podcast or you know me at all, you know my life. I'm very fortunate. Me and my father get to take, at least once a year, we'll go on a trip, usually international, to explore somewhere new. Sometimes they're more restful and vacation-y. Spain was like that.
Yeah.
Spain was amazing, but it was tropical Mediterranean climate, kind of slow moving. And the whole family was there. This trip was the opposite. It was the absolute opposite. It was an adventure, but not a vacation.
Yep.
Is how I say it. And we went to Egypt. Now, it was amazing. So the Sunday you came back, I flew to New York, had an incredible time in New York, had some of the best food I've ever had in my life. And then me and my dad flew from JFK to Cairo, and we spent a solid week in Egypt, and it was fascinating.
I bet.
Oh my gosh.
I saw your pictures of the Sphinx.
Yes, even like Trey, who's like very gifted photographer. Several people, they're like, the pictures don't look real.
Yeah.
It was another one of those trips, kind of like Iceland, that had never been on my particular bucket list. It was something my dad had been looking at, but I'm so glad that I went.
Oh.
And for a lot of reasons, a quick overview of the trip. We flew into Cairo, spent 2 days in Cairo.
Yeah.
One of those days technically Giza, which is like right outside of Cairo, but they're considered together. And then we flew to Aswan in the south of Egypt, which is a magical place. Spent a day there, and then from Aswan took a 3-night Nile River cruise.
Oh, wow.
Through which we stopped and explored all the most infamous temples and like Sphinx and statues and pyramids in Egypt, but really the world. And then after that, flew back to Cairo to go see where the Coptic Christians were, where some of the first churches in the world in Egypt were, where Jesus and the Holy Family stayed, the cave. We walked inside and just saw.
You think it was?
Yeah. How
do they know?
So I asked, and our tour guide was Muslim.
Yeah.
And Waleed, by the way, rated one of the top tour guides in the world, and he was phenomenal. All the tour guides in Egypt were the most passionate tour guides I've ever experienced on a trip. And they blew my mind, and their knowledge and expertise just was beyond, it was mind-blowing. But I asked Waleed, because when I went to Israel, I was the same thing with you. When we went to Israel, and whenever they would say, hey, this is where this happened, they would always preface it, and they would say, there's one of three things. Tradition says, we're pretty sure, or we know. That's what and I love that honesty. So I asked Waleed, I said, okay, how do they know? Are they sure? And this is what he said. He said, oh, we know. He said, by the way, both the Egyptian church documents this as the place, and the Vatican documents this as the place. He said, this is where it happened. So we went into the cave where supposedly it's verified and documented.
I just want to say this. The Vatican and the other ones document a lot of things.
True.
Like where they say Golgotha is.
True.
That I'm not really sure that a lot of people believe. So I'm a little bit. Yes. I go on. After going to Israel, other things. I know how the tour guides are, and they usually talk with 100% certainty that this is exactly what happened, and then you're left going, is that even possible?
True.
You know what I mean? So
and who knows? But I will say, Waleed's pretty blunt and cut and dry on his knowledge, and he's very knowledgeable. I think one of the things that made me think, okay, maybe there's a high probability, is because the Vatican and the Egyptian church would not normally be on the same page.
Sure, I understand.
So, little bit of just kind of like trivia or knowledge, whatever, for Egypt. 95% of Egypt is Muslim. Yeah. Only 5% is Christian. And of that 5%, almost none of them are Protestants or Catholics. They're almost all Orthodox.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So, which, by the way, maybe you knew this.
Orthodox as in
Eastern Orthodox.
Eastern Orthodox. Okay, that's what I was going to ask. I didn't know what slice of Orthodox it was. You have Russian Orthodox, you have German, you have all these.
Yeah, I believe it's
Orthodox,
Eastern Orthodox.
Eastern Orthodox.
And so we literally sat and I didn't know this was a part of the tour. Like this is the last day we're in Egypt, and I was blown away. And it was cool because, it was fascinating hearing about everything in Egypt, but it's a predominantly Muslim culture.
Yeah.
And to step into this space and to step into these ancient churches, we saw where there's a Mark Batterson type legend of how supposedly the early Christians moved the mountains right behind this site. That's a whole other story. It's fascinating. But we literally sat. I didn't know that Mark was the one that brought the gospel to Egypt. Did you know that?
No.
I didn't know that.
Mark?
St. Mark is the one that brought the gospel.
I didn't know
to Egypt.
that. I never knew that.
Yep. And so actually the first official church that ever existed in Egypt is in Alexandria, which I did not get to visit. But we sat in one that was like the second or third church in all of Egypt.
Really?
It was in Cairo.
Still exists?
Still exists.
Like physical location?
Yes. Yeah, so they showed us what's been built on top of
Okay,
one
I was
another.
going to say, they built new things on top.
And
they still have some of the old original, like, preserved underneath where you can go down and see it?
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
that's
And,
so
and we
cool.
saw, in fact, there's so many interesting things like that. This was kind
That's
of
first century.
convicting. There's one place they showed us where they had the early Christians, in like the first century AD, had put slanted boards like side by side, like with only like a little bit of a gap in between. And they figured out why they did that. You know why they did that? Because they would stand right underneath. It was like short ceiling boards. They would stand right underneath and read scripture long into the night. And they would take the tassels of their hair and tie it into the slant so that if they were to start falling asleep during the night, they would go poof, and their hair would catch.
No.
They would literally do that so that they would read scripture all through the night, and it would keep them from falling asleep. Like, crazy.
Really? So they're reading the Old Testament.
Yes.
Because this is first century, right?
Yep.
We're talking first century AD.
So,
CE.
and then, we saw the cave. Supposedly, we looked down the
That's
well where the whole Holy Family, Jesus and them stayed for months and got the water out of, walked right into. I mean, it was crazy. But anyways,
That's what's awesome.
Egypt was. So several things. One, and we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast, but you read about Egypt in history books and in scripture, and it almost, I like your words, it almost seems like fairy tales.
Yeah.
You read about the Nile.
Yeah.
You read about.
Wait, real quick.
Yes.
Up and down the Nile, please tell me, did you get to see any Nile crocs?
I did not. Definitely heard about it, but did not.
That's a lost trip. Never mind. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I did not.
You read about the Nile. You do.
And you just, I mean, first off, most of the sites we saw, whether it was the pyramids of Giza or the Great Sphinx or these temples, the hieroglyphics, I saw King Tut's tomb. I saw where King Ramses' tomb was.
I was going to say, did you get King Ramses'
Oh, yeah.
tomb?
And we went to the great Abu Simbel. It's like the really great, huge temple area where people come from all over the world to sit at the feet of the huge statues of King Ramses, which people, our tour guide literally said, he said, in 27 years of doing this, I've never taken a group to this one particular spot and not heard the visceral reactions. And sure enough, we were around the corner, and I mean, it literally takes your breath.
How big are they?
I've been to Rome. I've been to these places, but the sites I saw in Egypt were the most breathtaking sights I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, how big are they? Well, okay, here's some perspective. On several of the statues for King Ramses, the head, just the head, 118 tons.
Yeesh.
So
you're talking about the big statues that has the pharaoh-looking guy that has the little thing that comes down the sides, right? That you always see pictured on the front of the temple.
And which there are hundreds of those, but this is the biggest, the biggest of the big. I mean, a lot of these, almost all these sites are UNESCO World Heritage sites. The pyramids, obviously, the eighth wonder of the world. There's all these.
When was that built?
Well, so I don't know about specifically King Ramses, but what I was going to say is most of these incredibly ancient sites were 2,800 to 3,000 BC.
That's what I was going to say.
Isn't that insane?
Had to be a couple thousand, right?
And we're looking at preserved colors. Like the Egyptians were just brilliant. I mean, I think the thing that you forget is that the world came out of Egypt. It's called the motherland of the world. So mathematics, sciences, I mean, the Arab world, I mean, parts of Christianity. Like it is really literally the cradle of the Arab world, and most of civilization comes out of. I mean, we visited sites that they think were the first hospitals in humanity. And they literally, when you translate it from Arabic, it was house of life. And 2000 BC, you got hospitals. and you got doctors for men and doctors for women, and we're reading through the hieroglyphics how they figured out stuff that our modern medicine didn't figure out till 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Like 1,800 years before penicillin was invented, there's hieroglyphics that show take this rotten piece of bread if they can't stave off the infection and put it on the brain.
Crazy?
Like they were able to figure out if a woman could have children. They figured out all of these things, and of course there's all these mysteries around the pyramids. I was reading this morning that there was an invisible door in the pyramids that the archaeologists barely accidentally stumbled across. There was a spinning revolving door that was invisible and weighed several tons. Each of the little blocks of the pyramids, which by the way, up until like 1,000 years ago, the pyramids were the tallest structures in the world for 4,000 years. We're still not sure, besides potentially a pulley system, how they built them. Each little block weighed 2 tons in and of itself. Well, then there's all the mysteries of how like the circumference of the pyramids equaled the circumference of the world, and nobody knows how they knew it. Like crazy things.
That's weird.
It's insane.
I remember just being in Israel when we were looking at the portion of the Western Wall that existed. And they were talking about, again, it's the same kind of thing when you look back at when that was created, when they built them.
Yeah.
And you look, and they literally, you look at individual stones that, again, for when Solomon's temple, and the original was built, none of them were dressed there. They were all dressed in the quarry. They were cut out, whatever. And they bring them in and stack them, and they literally are the size of a car.
Yeah.
It's crazy. We're talking like the cornerstones, and the bottom ones are the size of a car. They're, 10, 12 feet by this feet, this tall, like huge. And you're like, how did they move those? And then they stacked them. And when they built walls, I didn't know this. You probably saw this stuff with the pyramids, but when they built the walls, they would stack them, but then they would adjust them so that they were like an inch inset or outside, I can't remember which way, so that when they stacked them all the way up, it created and did this thing. And it's like, how do you, back then, without machinery, put these things so perfectly in place that weigh tons. And you're like, they're a marvel when you think about the engineering. I can only imagine Egypt.
It's crazy. And it's obviously, when you read scripture, you think of Egypt as, they enslaved the children of Israel for 400 years. But another thing that was fascinating to realize about so many of these marvels is that they did not use slaves to do it. It was actually, most of what we've discovered now was civil volunteering and employment. Like they've actually found, like at the site of the great pyramids of Giza, they've actually found where workers were housed, and they've discovered that the people, because modern estimates are that 100,000 people. It was like a group of 100,000 that built these pyramids, and they were all paid fair wages. They all had access to hospital. They all were given for food. They were given beer and bread every day. They had their own doctors. They had their own dentists. So it's crazy. You think 3,000 BC. This is, by the way, before Moses. I started trying to go back and do the math, and I was even asking the tour guide, where was Moses? Where did all this happen? And because a lot of this is so ancient, it's literally happening before and during Moses' period. I think they said
Abraham.
They think, was it King Ramses was who's the king they actually think was in place?
King Ramses
during Moses. But yeah, it's just crazy. It's fascinating.
That's insane.
Yeah. It was about 103-4 degrees. Oh, whole time we're there. To beat crowds and beat the heat, we're getting up around 5 a.m. every day. Oh, it was fascinating but brutal. I told somebody, as much as I loved Egypt, a lot of trips, I fall in love with it right away. Then I'm ready to leave. Yeah. By the last day, this was the only one that was the opposite.
Really?
I slowly fell in love with Egypt, and by the last day, I didn't want to leave.
Really?
Part of it was our first day in Cairo. Cairo is officially the first major world city I've been to. I'm not a fan. Not a fan of Cairo.
Wow.
Did I tell you this?
No.
And this could be a combination of I had been traveling for 15 hours with no sleep, and it was so hot. And I think it threw me off, just to be honest, as much as I travel, it threw me off a little bit more than I thought, to be thrust for the first time in my life into a predominantly Muslim culture. And Cairo, people warned me. I texted a friend as I got off the plane in Cairo that I knew had friends and family in Cairo, and she said, I just want to warn you, it's chaotic. And I'm thinking, okay, cities don't stress me out. New York doesn't stress me out. LA doesn't stress me out. Cairo is the first city that stressed me out.
Wow.
It's just pure chaos.
Yeah.
It's pure pandemonium. I told somebody, I said, I've never been to India, but it feels like what I think New Delhi would be like. And they said, oh, yeah, it's often compared to New Delhi.
Yeah.
It's just masses of... So picture that you are all of a sudden thrust into the most chaotic, massive humanity ever. Cars are driving with no rules, honking 24/7. It's a completely all Muslim culture, and you're sleep deprived, and it stressed me out. Like it was so I wasn't crazy about Cairo. There's beautiful places in it.
Yeah.
We ate at the restaurant overlooking the city. We got to go to Giza, see the pyramids. The hotel was beautiful. But besides Cairo, the whole culture was just beautiful. The Nile, longest river in the world, 4,000 or 5,000 miles long. Cairo is considered the bottom part of it because they say it flows from top or from south to north, so it's weird how they consider it. But yeah, it was just fascinating. It was super fascinating.
Sounds pretty cool. What an experience to get to see that stuff in the history. I love it when you go back that far in history. You just like stand there and go, this was like 4,000 years ago, 5,000. You know what I mean? Like you're just like in awe.
That was
just
crazy.
looking at some of this stuff and kind of connecting it with maybe stories that we heard, you know, reading the Bible and other things like that. So
it's fascinating. And it's interesting. I had the thought while I was over there after listening to the tour guide. Egypt is kind of like, it sounds kind of weird, but kind of like the Cincinnati of the world.
Really?
What I mean by that is, you know how Cincinnati they say is like where Midwest, North, and South converge?
Yeah.
The tour guide, I thought was interesting. He said, if you were to ask if Egypt is a Mediterranean country or an African country or a Middle Eastern country, the answer is yes.
Oh.
So
I can see
Africa is where the Middle East, or Egypt is where the Middle East, Africa, and the Mediterranean converge. And so it's interesting you have all three of those cultures in one place.
That is interesting.
And
they're different.
And
they're all very different.
Very different. And the farther you travel from Cairo down south, it's really interesting. You travel down south the river of the Nile, and you travel back in time. So the further you go down south, the more it gets primitive in the villages and the areas.
It becomes more what you imagine for Africa and some
mud
of the
huts and villages and traditional Arab wear, like the women. Our tour guide was kind of, even though he's Egyptian, he was kind of rolling his eyes about it. He was like, yeah. You go down there, all the women that are married wear black because the sentiment is, if I have to go into, he literally said this. He said, Egyptian men are very jealous. He said, and if a married woman is going into town, she wears black as a symbol, quote unquote, I'm so sad I'm having to leave my husband. And she's letting people know she's married. So in traditional Arabic Egyptian culture, a married woman will never leave without wearing the black traditional garb, whereas single women will wear a very colorful garb.
Really?
To say, I'm single.
I'm available.
Oh. It's also interesting. I told somebody that Egypt is the birthplace of beer, but since beer is from Egypt, and I was
Milwaukee
thinking,
was.
You thought what?
Milwaukee.
No, it's, you would think so.
The beer. Okay, never mind.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But like 95% again is Muslim, and alcohol is haram. It's considered harmful or bad, and so almost no one drinks it.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It was really interesting. I had one day in particular, me and my dad, we got another private tour guide, just this one woman that took us around Cairo. So it was cool. It was just me, my dad, and her. And I just got to just be inquisitive Isaac and just ask all my questions about Islam. And it was really interesting even hearing her talk about all the different people around the world that she hosts. And I said, okay, not to put you on the spot, but who do you like hosting and who do you not like hosting? And she was like, honestly, I can host anybody but Europeans. She said, I have found them all to be the most arrogant people. Really? I said, really? She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, they seem to like have just complete judgment and non-openness to our culture and that they're coming over here. And she said, and I actually could see this. She goes, but I feel the most resonance with Latin Americans. Yeah. She said, and I said, no offense, but I watched the way y'all drive, and I remember living in Argentina, and I can see that. And she just laughed. She goes, no, it's true. So there's a similarity of Latin American culture and Egyptian culture. As weird as that may sound.
You wonder if somewhere in the, I don't know the best term for this, but the national psychology of people groups. You think about Europeans, right? It's not just Europeans, but predominantly when you think of them in the geopolitical world, you think of them going and conquering and them establishing, themselves all over the world. Like, you're now part of England.
Yeah.
Now you're all, you know what I mean? Just going and conquering the imperial, just like nature of doing that you almost wonder if that psychology carries on to where it's like, we don't have Egypt. Egypt doesn't belong to the queen. I don't know. It's a fascinating idea just based on what she said to wonder.
It is interesting. And like, because Egypt is, again, like the cradle. She basically said the whole Arab world looks to Egypt.
Really?
The whole Arab world looks to Egypt for everything. And so even like, we were talking about Israel earlier. Like she said, Egypt is the mediator between the Arab world and Israel.
Really?
And I was like, oh, so y'all don't, so you guys, like Israel. And she goes, she's like, no, most people here don't like Israel.
Yeah.
She said, even us, just as a nation, politically being a mediators in recent development. But,
wow. That's fascinating.
But anyways, I had to at least ramble some about
Yeah,
Egypt. But
that's
two quick things about
Right.
Egypt. One is while we were there, I remembered a story. I think I told you that Earl McManus once told about how he was preaching about his sermon topic was God delivering the children of Israel from their enemies of Egypt.
Right.
And he said when he got up to speak, he realized one of his Egyptian friends was on the front row. And he said it just made him realize, wait, I've got to completely be intentional and thoughtful how I approach the angle of this.
Yeah.
I got to put myself for a moment in the shoes of an Egyptian. And I will say, as somebody who's been to Israel, and obviously as a follower of Jesus, being in Egypt, falling in love with Egypt, immersing myself in Egypt, it made me realize again the power of constantly putting myself in the shoes of people that are different than me.
Yeah.
And quote unquote, what does it look like to see myself from the other side, to see life from the other side, to see the world from the other side? Even like even when I was talking to the guy about Israel, and she said, no, like we don't love Israel. We remember what they did to us. My initial, I wanted to kick back and be like, okay, but then I stopped myself. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Number one. Number two, half of this part of the world grew up, right or wrong, experiencing what they experienced. And so anyways,
and we know that when it comes to conflict, even geopolitical conflict, that there's always going to be two perspectives.
Yes.
Sometimes the world looks from the outside and makes judgments, but inside, your one side is always going to have their justifications for what they did, and the other side's going to have their justifications.
Yeah.
And some of it, the byproduct of these Egyptians, they were born there without choice.
Yeah.
This is where you're born. You're born into a culture. You're born into a generational just legacy of conflict and other things. We all have to recognize. I mean, it's just like, think about it here in America. And I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s, right? Just not to kind of give our own example of this is when you grew up in the 80s, you knew your enemy was Russia.
Yeah.
Here in America.
Yep.
Cold War. Soviet Union, fall of the wall, all of that stuff. Like we knew, our enemy was Russia.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the case now. I don't think, but I think that was not something that I would say my daughters grew up with at all. They would have not grown up. Now they're seeing something from Russia on the center stage in the world, and it's like, but we grew up that way. You had no other. It's just like they're our enemy. So imagine if you grow up in Egyptian culture, whether you're immediately going to have a perspective based on your culture, everything you learn, what you're taught, whatever. That's going to be different than if you grew up in Israel. And you are right, and we're all right, apparently. So that's fascinating. What was the other thing?
Okay, because I know we got to go, and it's just been a rambling catch-up podcast, and this is maybe indulgent for me. I get to just kind of explore these trips on this podcast. But I just think some of this is just so fascinating.
I like getting to learn about these places through you.
Well, then But I love it. It's
but I enjoy it. Nobody else cares, but
they
we care.
do.
Nobody
I'm
else
telling myself
cares,
they
but
do.
I like to learn about the history of Egypt that I had no idea.
It's fast.
So.
There's just so many powerful things.
Yeah.
We've beat a dead horse about the power travel, but then also like you also remember at the end of the day too, what makes a place is the people.
Yeah.
And I just met the most beautiful, wonderful people. And it's hard to, whatever your thoughts of a place or part of the world or a religion or whatever it is, all that collapses when you make connections with people.
Yeah.
And I met some of the most amazing people from all kind of religions, all kind of walks of life. In fact, one of the tour guides, not the main tour guide Waleed, but the girl that me and my dad, that hosted me and my dad around Cairo for a day, she's been messaging me ever since, asking me questions about my approach to Jesus.
Oh,
and God.
wow.
We've been having conversations. It's been really interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, her name's Yara. Shout out to Yara. But one of the couples, and it just reminded me too. It's funny whenever you get in those tour settings, you don't want to, but you make immediate kind of perceptions of the people in the group. Yeah. And there's this one couple that I didn't have negative perception, but you have in your mind what they're like.
Yeah.
And then towards the latter part of the week, I just connect with them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are the most amazing people. And they happen because I had my birthday this past weekend.
Yeah.
And the concert I saw on Friday, they happened to know the band. And it was just like the craziest serendipitous moments. But there's this one particular Asian couple that was on the trip that I met, and I actually told them about you because sharp couple, we start talking, and we get on the most fascinating conversation about AI. He is an IT in Manhattan. So him and his wife met in New York City, and he literally is creating IT or AI programs and like just futuristic operations for both the studio portions of their companies they work for the HR companies, and for the creative production side. Okay. So for 3 different sectors of all the companies, you can tell just guy has a lot of influence.
Yeah.
He's creating AI operations and algorithms and just, I mean, I took notes. I'm like, I even told him, I said, we need to like zoom you into a podcast
that
because
would be
it was the brilliant man and a believer. He started talking. He goes, because I started talking about AI, then we get on some other thing, and like he could just tell like we had a lot of mutual random interests. And he's like, what do you do? And I was like, well, actually, because I never tell people. I was like, actually working at a church. He goes, what? He said, me and my wife met at a church that we're super plugged into in New York, and we're really passionate about Jesus and had the most fascinating conversations. And I was like, my pastor, he was in IT and talking about all this kind of stuff. Anyways, we built a connection, we exchanged contacts, and the last night in Cairo, we're in Egypt. We're back in Cairo. Yeah. They're doing a farewell dinner with the group. We're in this insane hotel, like great, beautiful dinner. And me and him are sitting across from each other. And his wife, kind of with a roll of her eyes, was like, she goes, you two are like, she goes, can you believe all the stuff that my husband's into? He's into sailing, surfing, science, IT, AI, all these things. She starts going on and on about all the crazy thing he does.
Yeah.
And he gets really quiet for a second. And he said, yeah. He said, I guess if I'm just being really honest, like for me, it just all goes back to 9/11. And I said, 9/11?
Huh.
What do you mean? And he said, well, I was in the tower.
Oh, wow. He was in the tower?
He said, I was in the tower. I said, you were in the tower on 9/11? He said, yeah, I was in the second tower. And over the next 30 minutes, he unpacks the whole story of hearing the plane crash in the tower across from him, how it shook. He thought it was an earthquake. He was in a room alone, so he didn't realize that everybody else was mass panicking. So since he was in a room alone, for him, instead of panicking, he froze. And he almost didn't move. And then finally he was like, I probably should call somebody because I don't know what's happening. He called security and said, what should I do? And the security just said, get out as fast as you can. Well, he actually got out first because he was near an emergency staircase that nobody else knew about. So he runs down the staircase, runs outside just in time to watch people jumping from the tower. And just in time, he watched with his eyes the other plane hit the tower.
So he was in the first tower.
He said second. He said second. I don't know if the way he referenced it was because it confused me, but he was in the second to be hit, I guess.
Okay.
But he saw the second plane hit the tower.
Okay.
Once he was like far fell to his knees, and just was.
Oh my gosh.
It was insane. Like, I got chills. He just talked about it for 30 minutes. But I also thought, for me, I just thought that was also out of the tragedy. That's such a beautiful thing of you see somebody that's full of life, that's chasing all these passions, interests, hobbies, dreams. And it goes back to that moment of I could have died and I'm never going to take life for granted again.
That's cool.
And it just was this crazy way to end the trip of like, man, I want to strive to live life.
Yeah.
Like there's not a second run and not taking a day for granted.
That's so good. That's crazy. Wow, it'd be fun to have someone like that on our podcast if we could figure out a way to do it well.
We need to do it.
I'm serious.
We got a list of...
I really have a ton of questions about AI.
Oh.
I mean, I know we've talked about it on here before, but I feel like they're not going away. Like my questions about AI are not going away. And the uses of it. So it'd be fascinating to talk to somebody who is like maybe hands-on working with it, and what are the ethical implications, if anything, that you recognize while you're working on this stuff.
But you know what's interesting, because I don't know if you listened to the one we had with Greg on. We're talking about, and I told him actually about AI 2041, the book, and he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I haven't heard of this. Like, got on Amazon, bought it. Yeah. But I asked him, because I've noticed a common denominator of everybody that's in the AI space that's really knowledgeable about it. I said, okay, so bottom line question, are you optimistic or are you afraid? He goes, oh, I'm super optimistic.
That's cool.
And he was just, he wasn't afraid at all.
Speaking of which, and we can close with this if we were ready. I read an article that I think Zach sent me. I can't remember who it was. He might have sent it to you. I don't know. This was might have been while you were gone. And it was the craziest thing that made the most sense ever. If you have a super computer / almost with a human understanding, like, but imagine you just continually dump it with information. This was the most fascinating thing. A lady a mom who had a son who was sick with a really strange sickness that no one could figure out, put her information and stuff into AI, and AI spit out what it thought that she had, and she went to the doctors, and her son has a very, very rare thing that AI predicted.
Oh my gosh.
And reading that article, I wish I was trying to find it. I just can't find the article. Reading that article just kind of blew my mind to the possibilities of, like, can you imagine a supercomputer that understands and can correlate? Imagine all medical records across the U.S., the world, whatever, of everybody's symptoms and what they were diagnosed with. Like, the limitations that we have when we go to a doctor who has very limited exposure, maybe you've got something that's rare or whatever, but to be able to put in the medical history, to put in that she put in this thing, she put in the blood test results, put all of that information I had into this, and it kicked out some rare disease that he had, and the doctors ended up testing and believe that's it and are treating for it, and it could completely change this kid's life because of AI.
So insane.
It was mind-boggling, and it just it's just I keep coming up more and more things that I just never imagined. And I'm like, this could be a game changer for a lot of people.
On maybe a slightly less powerful note, is it CGI like that's kind of becoming obsolete a little bit?
Yeah, CGI.
So one of the companies that he works with has like this entire like warehouse of like CGI huge computers that are becoming obsolete. Yeah. So Jeff, my friend from the trip, he asked his boss. He said, "Hey, can I just take all these computers and repurpose them for AI simulation?" And his boss said, "Sure." So it's like a whole warehouse of former CGI screens that he's repurposing.
Okay.
And he said this next part very winsomely, but basically when they brought him in to one of the roles he's in now, it was obvious the guy before him had screwed up a bunch of the systems. So one day after he repurposed all these computers, he said, I wonder if I could reverse engineer to figure out what he did to screw all this up. And he began asking AI, hey, if I'm seeing this problem, what may have... And he said literally within 3 days of reverse engineering through AI, they found out how this guy screwed everything up and how they need to fix it.
Wow. I'm telling you that
what they would have never discovered, or what would have taken months or years to discover, in 3 days of asking AI everything about this system.
That's crazy.
They figured out what the guy did wrong and how they needed to fix it.
That's insane. I'm telling you, it is finally, like, people that have been around AI have been speaking about this for a decade more, but it feels like it has been launched into mainstream and become acceptable.
Yeah.
Whereas, years ago when stuff was happening, you had people who was it Elon Musk or Mark Cuban were like, this is going to destroy, we need to shut this down, initially, that I feel like that was kind of like it got squashed. But for some reason, this go round with ChatGPT and the way that it feels like it's becoming widely accepted.
Yeah.
I mean, we one of the things that was, I don't know if we should tell this little secret, but it was crazy that Zach showed me, like, you want to talk about replacing, or not really replacing, but like part of someone's work was he took a message that he did here.
Oh, yeah.
Did he show you this?
Yes.
And you can load it into these AI things, say, here's how long I want it to be, all this, and it generated like 20 versions of a reel from a 40-minute message that it cut up, and it made sense with captions under it in minutes.
Crazy.
Tons of options.
Crazy.
I mean, AI is changing content. I don't think people realize what content is probably being produced from AI right now. Like on social media. Like, people are using AI to produce their content.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize it.
That's crazy.
And so now we are not going to know what we're looking at is either human or not. Like, what's being created. So it's a fascinating time with
really
technology. So, well, I'm glad you're back. It sounds like your trip was interesting. It was incredible. Those kind of trips are not restful. They're not vacations, but they are like, you just...
They're like, I'm so grateful.
They're so...
I'm so grateful. I feel like I'm still recovering a week later, but I'm so grateful.
No, that's so awesome. I'm glad I got to live through you. I need to try to do places like that. Like, those are places I would never think about. It's like when you went to Iceland. Like, that is not on my list.
Yeah. But man, breathtaking.
Yeah. And so... just keeps adding places that maybe got to figure out how to get to.
Need to do it. That's cool. Again, hey, anybody watching, I just want to remind you, I am not rich, but I'm rich in gratitude that my dad, number one, has a passion to this, but number two, finds incredible deals. Yeah. And I'm just going to go ahead and give a shameless plug, affordabletours.com. If you want to find trips and find insane deals to experience
different than Gate One Travel.
So Gate One Travel was one of the companies that is promoted by Affordable Tours. Okay. So yeah, shout out. I know Anna and Tucker. I was telling them about Gate One. They're using Gate One to go to, I think, Greece in January. So Gate One, but if you have a desire to travel,
go look at
and you're wanting to prioritize it, you can find a great deal to do it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be back. It was a wide-ranging convo. Hopefully, it was at least entertaining. Yep. And I don't know. But thank you for joining us. And tell us, do you want us to do hot takes now that we have Pastor Tim back? I'm curious about the hot takes you've been documenting.
Well, I'm starting to collect them because I knew we were going to do it. So when I have something that comes to my mind, I'm like, oh, he's not going to agree with this. I'm going to write it down. So there's just some funny ones so far. But anyways.
All right, we got to go. Until next time, thank you for joining us for the X podcast. And if you haven't had a chance yet, rate, review, and subscribe. And until next week, we'll see you then.